taking other kinds of cars that they thought were well designed and modifying them in a way that made them even cooler than anything you might see on the street. So here's somebody driving a car like that out to the beach with a board on top of it, and taking most of their clothes off, with girls who also had most of their clothes off, and there's a real freedom right there. So everybody's fantasizing about, like, oh man, these kids have got it made. And they did have it made. There wasn't, that wasn't really phony. It was a real thing. They had it so good.
That's one of the songs that compositionally you begin to get a sense of Brian's ability to very elegantly weave together completely different kinds of influences. It begins just as a kind of a bluesy shuffle. It's just like a 2-3 chord straight up rock and roll song until you get to the chorus, which suddenly pivots into minor chords. You don't notice it at the time, but it's completely divorced from the logic and the structure of the chords in the central part of the verse. When it gets to the part where they sing, "She's my little deuce coupe, you don't know what I got."
And if that ain't enough to make you flip your lid, there's one more thing, I got the pink slip daddy. And coming off the line when the light turns green, well, she blows them out of the water like you never seen. I get pushed out of shape, and it's hard to steer. But I get rubber in all for good. She's my little deuce coupe, you don't know what I got.
It ends with that great sort of triumphant proclamation where he says, and there's one more thing, I got the pink slip daddy, which is, the pink slip being the registration or the title to the car. So it's like, this is all mine. Like, you can't take this away from me. I've got this power. I've got this, I can, at a moment's notice, hop in my car and go anywhere I want to. And if that's not, a vivid evocation of a real Central American ideal, which is go anywhere at any time, you're not going to be tied down by any kind of limitations as long as you've got enough gas in the car. And that's all right there in that last fragment of that lyric.
Dennis Wilson was a hot rodder. Gary Usher and Roger Christian loved hot rods. They were writing songs with Brian. And Brian was kind of like this remote guy, maybe even a sociologist, kind of kicking back and vicariously taking things from Dennis and Roger Christian and Gary Usher and sort of seeing what was going on and going, aha, well then I could put this into songs and make a cool song. Just like these guys made a cool car, I'm going to make a cool song. And so Little Deuce Coupe's a whole album full of that.
His eyes were opening up to the fact that there was a whole community of, people to work with who were not, directly related to him and not a part of this Murray Wilson circle.
And this community of potential collaborators presented Wilson with an opportunity to stretch his creative muscles beyond the business of hit-making for the Beach Boys. During the gestation of the Surfer Girl and Little Deuce Coupe albums, Brian, newly enriched by his band's chart assaults, rented a Hollywood office just a stone's throw from the Capitol Records Tower. Having scaled back on his touring commitments, Brian used the attendant freedom to ingratiate himself into the wider recording industry community. He began to work new material in ever more prolific quantity, exploiting the artistic space to collaborate with other songwriters and develop ideas in a loose, intuitive fashion.
In those days, the community, the music community, was very, very casual, and so you'd go to different publishing offices, and I used to go hang at Screen Gems, and Brian would come by, and we became friendly, and then I'd go to his office. And, he'd just sit at the piano and start doing stuff, and he'd come up with something and say, well, why don't we, let's finish this. It's that simple.
Brian was really excited because he had just taken out an office. He had a little office in the Sunset Vine Tower at the corner of Sunset and Vine in Hollywood. And he wanted me to see his office, And there's this little reception room with a secretarial desk, but there was no secretary, right? I don't think it was more than 700 square feet, maybe. Probably not even that, right? And he had a big executive chair, but no desk, just this big leather chair. And he had an upright piano against the wall because it wasn't big enough for a grand piano, for a concert piano. And he says, I'm just working on this song. I want to run it by you. He says, as a matter of fact, I want you to sing a line or two. You know how to sing, and you can do Carl's part, and I want to do my falsetto part to see what the harmony is going to sound like. He said, you come in at the chorus. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, So we're standing at the piano, and he's like hitting the notes and singing, and it's like, well, she got to Daddy's car and she cruised through the hamburger stand now, and then we get to the chorus, and you come in here and we'll have fun, 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 and there was fun, fun, fun.
Shh, please be quiet, you guys. Please, I mean, I'm begging your little butts. Okay, let's go. It's okay. A wop, a wop, a what I do, oh, wop, a wop, a what I do, oh, wop, a wop, a what I do, oh, wop, a wop, a what I do now. I used to think I was an all-time guy now. I used to put down every girl that came by. I thought it was cool now to treat them all mean. But I'll be sweet to my family, Gene. Whoa, yeah.
The freedom to explore ideas naturally moved Brian to begin extending his talent. His work with the Beach Boys, from the sophisticated harmony arrangements to the desire to command the studio process, had demonstrated an ability to conceptualize the total sonic identity of a given song, as well as a bent for innovation. A confirmed admirer of towering LA writer and producer Phil Spector, Wilson dedicated a significant amount of his time to the studio, writing and producing for a diversity of other acts, among them Sharon Marie, The Survivors, Jan and Dean, and The Honeys, a girl group fronted by his future wife, Marilyn Ravel.
I think he saw himself as the center of a growing empire. The music and songs were just exploding out of the guy at the time. It was a heavy burden to do the Beach Boys stuff, but he could keep up, obviously, and do better and better work and make it more and more sophisticated along the way. But he could also write songs that were designed for completely different voices, completely different personalities, completely different bands. And that was, I think, a very sort of powerful and, a very important statement for him to make.
There were Jan and Dean, the Honeys, which were a girl band. With them he tried to create a sort of Beach Girls sound. And there were a number of others. At that time, he certainly was interested in being a producer of lots of different things. And the model of Phil Spector comes to mind.
The Honeys was because he was a girl he liked, who he married, Marilyn, and her sister and cousin. So that was kind of, yeah, I'll produce you. It wasn't like he went out and sought out artists. Then it was all kind of more, I think, more of a cousin of a friend of a friend.
Brian loved to produce. This recording studio was Brian Wilson's canvas, and he would splash sound, colors. And when the Beach Boys were on the road, Brian was home. And he was surrounded by all these brilliant musicians and writers and artists. So of course he was going to be in the studio with other people. There was a little bit of a controversy about him giving the song Surf City to Jan and Dean instead of the Beach Boys. There was a little feud about that between him and his dad and I guess Mike, but that's just, Brian, he was expressing himself. There was no holding him back.
Brian and Jan Barry formed a relationship that lasted through several Jan and Dean albums. And one of the best examples of this is the song Surf City, which was actually Brian Wilson's first #1 record, but it wasn't a Beach Boys record. It was a Jan and Dean recording, but it was a Brian Wilson song, a collaboration between Brian Wilson and Jan Barry. But if you look at Surf City, then you see a lot of Brian Wilson's fingerprints It starts with the vocal hook, Two Girls for Every Boy, which sounds